this week's drive, we fall down and get back up again. Take a slide, a slam and a thunk. Take a ride to the other side. And see how they go racing in Middle-earth. All this and more in this week's Drive. We start this week with a new car from the world champions. Ferrari's Formula One team gathered at their Maranello headquarters to unveil their new car for the 2005 season. Named the F2005 and designed by Italian engineer Aldo Costa, the car probably won't be seen until the Spanish Grand Prix in early May. They will take a gamble and start the season with an updated version of the successful F2004 model. The decision to start the new model later in the season is intended to give team technicians time to test the car's reliability, with new technical rules coming into force this season. But Ferrari could race their new car earlier than planned if the old one proves too slow, according to technical director Ross Brawn. Brawn told reporters that Ferrari could introduce the new car at the season's third race in Bahrain rather than the fifth in Spain, if the modified version of last year's dominant car struggled too badly. The new Ferrari is the 51st Formula One model designed in Maranello, near Modena. Ferrari won 15 of 18 races last season, with Michael Schumacher taking 13 on the way to securing an unprecedented 7th series title.
I'm always in love with any Ferrari, in particular when it's a new one, which you know is supposed to be better than the old one.
Ferrari have said that they're prepared for a tough start to the season, but Schumacher has confidence in both the car and the team and says he's unconcerned by the prospect of racing the opening rounds with the old model.
Concerned is the wrong word. I would have loved to race the new car, obviously, for the first race, but our strategy is a different one, and we think this strategy is the right one. We have to prove it.
Schumacher will team up once again with Brazilian Rubens Barrichello.
No, I guess I've been in love with so many Ferraris before, but yesterday I had a chance to actually be alongside the car and just had a fantastic moment seeing them building the car, so it was just nice. The car looks good, so if it goes as fast as it is pretty, it's going to go very well.
The Jordan team has also launched their new car, unveiling the EJ15 and their 2005 drivers in Moscow's Red Square. The team's members braved sub-zero temperatures and snowfall as they presented their 2005 Challenger to the Russian and international media that had gathered in Moscow's oldest and most famous square, bounded by the imposing landmarks of the Kremlin, St. Basil's Cathedral and Lenin's Mausoleum. Jordan will start the season with Toyota power and their all-new driver lineup of Narain Karthikeyan, the first Formula One driver to hail from India, and Portugal's Tiago Monteiro. The team was bought by Russian-born Canadian businessman Alex Snyder last month and will be renamed Midland F1 in 2006. The new team is highly unlikely to challenge for honours in the near future, but will still be hoping to make a positive impression. Karthikeyan has gained a reputation as the fastest Indian on wheels, following his performances in Formula 3 and the Telefonica World Series. The 28-year-old from Chennai will look to prove himself on motorsport's greatest stage. The major sponsorship that he and Monteiro have attracted will greatly benefit the team during a period of transition. The season ahead will be the culmination of a lifetime's ambition for Karthikeyan.
Why? Because I liked it. Since I was a kid, I liked Formula One, and nobody in India had ever done it. So I thought it was a challenge, and it really was a really big challenge. Lots of ups and downs, But nevertheless, I've been successful in Formula 3. Won races there, won races in the World Series, and the next step is Formula One. So I'm here now. Obviously, we have realistic goals this year. The Jordan Midland deal was done very late. The car obviously is not going to be running in the front. And if it qualify in 14th position ahead of the Red Bull cars, we'll be really, really happy. And but that has to be the goal, and we need to try and finish races first, and the odd races get some points. So if we work towards that, then everything will go well, very well, I think.
Formula One's popularity in India continues to grow, and with an Indian driver on the F1 grid, an increase in the TV audience of the sport is expected.
The thing with Narain is he's just totally fearless. high-speed corners especially, he's got massive commitment. He just doesn't realise that maybe what he's doing is dangerous. And because of that, he does tend to make the odd mistake and go off the circuit. So I think we might see a little bit of that this year, but it'll be because he's trying, and he's trying to prove himself, and I think that's what the public want to see. They want to see a driver that's pushing to the limit and not a driver that's just driving around looking like he's on rails. So, yeah, it's the commitment he's got that really impresses me.
Financial gains are of little importance. He just hopes to emulate his sporting hero and eventually clinch the Drivers' Championship.
That is so many ifs and buts here, you know. Michael is an awesome driver and he's my hero, and obviously you would like to emulate him, but you know, it's such a big challenge. But I mean, given the right equipment, you know, when we, for example, in Formula 3, we had all the same equal cars, and you know, I won races, and in World Series I won races with equal cars. So yeah, good equipment. I should, you know, why not? I could go for the World Championship, and when I have the experience.
Son of Indian Rally champion G.R. Karthikeyan, Narain tested with Jordan and Minardi in 2001 but didn't make the grade. A lack of sponsorship cost him a drive in 2003 with Minardi, but with the support of 3 major Indian companies, he now has the opportunity of a lifetime. Former world champion Jacques Villeneuve returns from retirement and is looking forward to racing for the Sauber team this year.
Also, Melbourne is a track where in the past I've been competitive, and it sets the post for the rest of the season. No, winning the championship first doesn't create any problem. It makes life easier. It makes life easier because you're then allowed to build a bigger experience from the team. The team will listen to you a little bit more. You can work more on the car and evolve it.
His father Gilles drove for Ferrari in a brief but illustrious career.
I've never had a driver hero. I've had my father the hero, but not because he was a driver, because he was my father, and driving cars was a normal part of life. That's what everybody did in my mind when I was 5, 6, when I was a kid. So I would never be a big fan of any other driver, because that's what my dad did anyway, and you can never replace your dad.
Gilles took his second of 6 wins at Kyalami in South Africa in 1979, but died in practice at Spa in 1982. Sauber have been working hard on the new car for this year.
Right now I'm with a great little team that has the right spirit and mentality. The only thing we lack now is the big budgets from the big teams to allow us to have, you know, 100 different pieces to try to find out what is best. And we're not right now at the level to fight for wins, but we're at the level to fight to get good results, to get close to the podiums, maybe fight for podiums, that we will find out. And if that happens, then we can get a bigger budget that will then allow us to work more like the bigger teams and make the next step that is needed.
Canadian Villeneuve, who raced for Renault in the last 3 races last year, is hoping for better than the 12th achieved by his teammate Massa last season.
Well, having the best car helps to win the championship, of course. But if you have a car that's a lot slower, then there's no chance unless the best car breaks down all the time. If you're just a little bit slower, then there's a small chance. If there's many cars that are just a little bit slower, then it becomes possible. Because the problem, if you look at Ferrari next year, if they have a bad race, they still finish 3rd or 4th. So even on a bad race, they would get a lot of points, because there was only maybe 1 or 2 cars that were close enough to beat them when they had a bad race. But if you have 5, 6, 7 cars that are just 2 or 3 tenths behind, then Ferrari on a bad day would have finished 8th or 9th, no points. And then it becomes possible with a car that's a little bit under the best to work your way into a position to fight for the championship at the end.
It's not testing as we know it, but it's certainly dramatic. Mark Webber was ripping up the tarmac on one of Australia's most famous landmarks, Sydney Harbour Bridge. Australia hosts the opening round of the series, and the company's finest driver of his generation was putting his car through its paces. In last year's BMW Williams, Webber drove 5 times across the bridge, but was limited to just 90 kilometres an hour.
Well, it was incredible, very bumpy as well. I think obviously it's a road, of course, and it's a bridge. So over the years, of course, the bridge is moving around. So a lot of the bumps in the Formula 1 car that you feel. And that was something I had to concentrate on. Even in a straight line, the car was moving around quite a lot. But it was a fantastic experience, obviously, really good.
At 8:10 a.m, the Australian set off and crossed the bridge, while spectators followed the stunt on a huge video screen. He'll be hoping that the experience of performing in front of a loyal Melbourne crowd will give him the required lift. For Webber's stunt, the coat hanger, as the Australians nicknamed their bridge, was blocked off for a couple of hours. Usually, traffic runs over the nearly 50-metre wide deck in 8 lanes, plus 2 railway lines, a walkway and a bicycle way. The Sydney Harbour Bridge, opened in March 1932, is still the biggest, but not the longest, steel arch bridge in the world. At its highest point, the arch reaches 134 metres above water level.
The
200,000 spectators filled the stands for the running of the Daytona 500, the first round of the 36-race series, hot on the heels of the Bud Shootout and the Daytona 24 Hours. The race on the high-banked superspeedway got underway without any incident. The first crash of note took place on lap 28 when Ricky Rudd cut a left rear tyre and Elliott Sadler in the number 38 car spun in a crash that involved quite a few cars. With just 32 laps left, John Andretti and Jason Leffler crashed after Andretti scraped Travis Kvapil. Andretti's car slid down in front of Leffler, who couldn't avoid him. It was a big hit and Leffler was out, credited with 36th place. Andretti survived another 19 laps and finished 31st. Things began heating up with 17 laps left when, on lap 184, Greg Biffle and Scott Riggs bumped in the middle of a pack and ignited a 9-car crash that sent Scott Wimmer barrel rolling and then spinning several times on the nose of his car before landing on his wheels. Remarkably, Wimmer was not injured.
Huge. Make contact.
One of the wildest finishes in the 47-year history of NASCAR's biggest race saw 4 lead changes in the last 9 laps. Defending champion Dale Earnhardt came from 30th place to grab a late lead, only to watch 4-time series champion Jeff Gordon pass him seconds before a caution flag waved with 3 laps to go. There'd be no denying Jeff Gordon as he held off all challengers to take the win.
I knew over 500 miles that the pit crew, that team, and hopefully, some patience would pay off there at the end, and it certainly did. And I'm so stoked. Daytona 500. Yes, yes.
Gordon's the 5th driver to win 3 or more Daytona 500s. It was billed as one of the most important vintage car auctions for decades, from Rolls-Royces to Bentleys, Fords to Fiats. Many of the cars belonged to British collector George Milligan. Included in the collection was this rare 1929 Mercedes-Benz SSK 2-seater sports tourer. In its time, known as the fastest sports car in the world, it could do up to 120 miles an hour. George Milligan paid £400 for it in 1941. At the sale, it went to a private buyer who's promised to keep it in Britain for £4.1 million.
It's a unique collection. It covers cars from 1890s. In fact, it covers steam engines from the 1860s right the way through to the 1960s. And therefore, every area of car collecting and steam and model collecting has been, expressed interest. We've had potential buyers from Japan, from America, from South America, from all over the world, in fact. And consequently, we've got a very broad mix of people here today.
This historically important model of the Great Northern Railway Atlantic locomotive and tender, including handbrakes, injector valves, pressure and twin water gauges, all in perfect working order, was sold for more than £33,000. This once horse-driven steam fire engine, possibly the oldest surviving steam fire engine in private hands, was built around 1868. It went for just under £15,000. Milligan died last year, aged 94. He was a capable engineer as well as a compulsive collector, but not all his toys were pristine. This 1937 Ford Model V8 pickup was found in one of his barns. A wreck to some, a jewel to others. It went for £7,000. The World Superbike Series opened in Qatar in unusually cold and wet conditions. In a rain-hit final qualifying session, the top 10 riders squared off for grid positions in the Superpole. British world champion Ducati rider James Toseland could only manage 13th spot, leaving him back on the 5th row of the grid for the two races. Although declared wet, Friday's Superpole in fact started with a dry track, but rain began to fall during practice, forcing the qualifiers to remain in the pits for much of the session. Chris Vermeulen qualified on the second row. The Australian crashed at the final turn of a hot lap after indicating to Yukio Kagayama that he was turning in. Vermeulen was forced to run back to his garage to get onto his spare machine, going out again and finally qualifying in 8th place. Australia's former world champion Troy Corser is nicknamed the King of Superpole, and with the track drying out completely in the final 10 minutes, the riders scrambled to complete a fast lap. Corser looked to have secured his place at the front of the grid once again as he seized the leading time from France's Sébastien Guimbert with just a few minutes remaining in qualifying, going under a quarter of a second quicker than the Frenchman. Regis Laconi was lying in third place at that time behind Corser and Guimbert, but the French Ducati rider saved his best for last with a fast lap with less than a minute to go. His time on the 5.38 kilometre circuit knocked Troy Corser from top spot and pushed Guimbert down into third place. Laconi, who narrowly lost out in the title to Toseland last season, would lead the front row for the opening two races of the 2005 World Superbike season, followed by Corser, Guimbert and Kagayama. The opening race the next day saw Yukio Kagayama power into the lead from fourth on the grid, once again in uncharacteristically wet and grey conditions in the desert state. But the Japanese rider who left the British Suzuki Superbike team to race on the world scene this season was passed soon after by Alster Suzuki teammate Corser. The 33-year-old Australian was dominant until the 10th lap when rain caused a halt in proceedings. Racing on slicks on a wet track invites a crash. As leader, Corser was obliged to signal a halt to organisers who hung out the red flags. But after the restart, he paced himself and sat in a safe third place for the remaining 8 laps. Kagayama, who'd been battling Regis Laconi for second spot when the red flag came out, crossed the line first. But it was Corser, third after the restart, who took the overall victory on combined time by more than 3 seconds. Kagayama was second and Frenchman Laconi third. Australian Andrew Pitt claimed fourth ahead of teammate Nori Haga and reigning world champion James Toseland in sixth. In drier conditions, the second race of the day saw Pitt, fourth in the first race, pull away into the lead. But Suzuki teammates Corser and Kagayama were not long in taking over once again. And after a tough battle over the early laps, as time wore on, it was the 30-year-old Japanese rider from Yokohama who managed to establish the lead. Corser, on a different choice of harder rear Pirelli tyre than the rest of the top riders, eventually slipped down to third behind Laconi, with Kagayama completing a relatively comfortable victory. Vermeulen edged out a tight battle for fourth, with Pier Francesco Chili fifth and Toseland sixth once again. Kagayama moves into an early lead in the overall standings with 45 points. Corser has 41 and Laconi 36. The next round of the 2005 World Superbike Championships is at Phillip Island in Australia in 5 weeks' time. St. Petersburg gave Adam Raga's rivals a chance to halt his cruise to a third world title. With a collection of 12 indoor and outdoor titles, Dougie Lampkin certainly has the pedigree to provide a meaningful challenge to Raga. The British Montesa rider has struggled to maintain his place at the head of the trials world recently on his new four-stroke machine. While Lampkin struggles, riders such as Raga, Albert Kabastani and Takahisa Fujinami have all made their mark. Lampkin would qualify for the three-man final lap in second place, conceding 6 penalty points over the 7 observed sections, a double lane race and a high jump. But just as Raga has replaced Lampkin as the indoor trials king, it looks as though the next rider in line to the throne has already emerged. Jerónimo Fajardo claimed the first podium place of his career at the previous Grand Prix in Barcelona, and he qualified for the final in Russia after receiving 8 penalties on the qualifying lap. The 19-year-old Spaniard, a European trials champion in 2002, maintained his brilliant form in the final and claimed second place overall with 15 points, 7 less than third-placed Lampkin, who finished with 22. However, even Fajardo's excellent performances were completely overshadowed by the unstoppable Raga. The Gas rider looks almost certain to win his 3rd consecutive indoor world title this season, following a 6th victory of the season in Russia. Raga was in near perfect form on the qualifying lap, where he conceded just 2 penalty points. The final lap provided Raga with a greater challenge, and he dropped a maximum 5 penalties on the treacherous 3rd section. Lampkin and Fajardo also received 5s on section 3, but while they continued to rack up the points, Raga was soon back to his brilliant best. A final score of 7 penalties saw Raga ease to victory, and he will look to make it 7 wins from 7 rounds when the season continues at the Italian Grand Prix in Milan. So, halfway through the season, Raga holds a 17-point lead over Kabastani with 6 rounds to go. And finally, something completely different. Stock car team racing is unique to New Zealand. There are 2 teams of 4 cars each. The rules state that the first team to get 1 car to complete 10 laps is the winner. The sport allows full contact, and the cars are built accordingly. High drama in Heat 7 as Joel Pitcher slammed into Mike Herbert, who was knocked unconscious with his foot on the throttle. The car, on fire, drove around the wall as officials tried to stop it. The cars deliver 500 horsepower from 3.9-litre engines and can reach speeds of 70 miles an hour on the dirt ovals. Eventually, a Rotorua Rebels teammate stops in front of Herbert's car and stalls it, and the fire is put out. Rules are simple. Cars may not drive the wrong way round the track or use the infield to attack from another direction. Other than that, you can do pretty much what you like. A team will have a runner and 3 blockers, but as cars are taken out, runners turn into blockers and vice versa. Local driver and team captain Kevin Roberts gets trapped against the wall, but a teammate drives through to earn victory for the Mustangs. In the final, the Manawatu Mustangs, who are the second-string Palmerston team, took on the Christchurch Glen Eagles, who were appearing in their first final in 20 years of trying. In one incident, Barry Lane of the Mustangs took out Nigel Ngati of the Glen Eagles team. Everyone continued to hit each other for most of the race, but the decisive moment came when Graham Keats of the Glen Eagles failed to stop Gary Hayes and the Mustangs' last and only running car, limping home to gain victory for the Manawatu Mustangs. Victory in the 25th Stock Car Teams Championship salvaged some pride for Palmerston North after the fancied local Panthers team were eliminated in qualifying. Somehow, it's not hard to believe that this is the same country that gave us the Lord of the Rings movies. So, whether you're crossing over, passing over, or just rolling over, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.